feed.
You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
And today we have a special guest, a returning guest, Demetrius Minor from Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. So we talked to him about a year ago, and so we're kind of going to get a few updates on what's going on in that area, and maybe ask a few more questions as well, anything we didn't cover in that earlier show. So what we do nowadays is we start right off with a Liberty quote that's hopefully related a little bit to the topic. And in this case, I think we went I guess a little bit out of this world to find this quote, but this is I think a really on point quote. So Leon, can you bring up the quote? So this is one of our favorite topics here are analogies for government and such as Lord of the Rings. We like to talk about that a little bit here, about how, that ring of power is, kind of one of those things we got to look to reduce a little bit. But Gandalf in the story, J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, he's kind of a wise wizard in that story. And he has a great quote where he says, many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. But can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. So I thought that was kind of a cool quote for the death penalty. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on this quote before we jump into the topic.
From a moral, spiritual sense, I would agree that, many of us deserve death. Or at a minimum, we don't deserve the promises, the mercies, the grace that has been extended to us. And if it was not for the unconditional love of a Savior and Creator that took that ultimate punishment, which we will talk about extensively here, the death penalty, then it will be us that should have taken on that fate. So in some contexts and to some varying degree, that that statement does have some merit to it.
Well, I would say is that it's always a difficult thing as to whether man, am I using that in the generic sense, man should be doling out death to his fellow citizens, whether it's done through the state or done through on the streets without the due process of law. I'm really torn about the whole idea that man can just distribute debt as he or she sees fit. That's problematic in my mind. And so I guess we'll talk more about my feelings about the death penalty as we go through this. But I think the quote is quite appropriate, quite frankly.
Yeah, I like the last line, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. And I think most of us can agree that we don't even have the very wise running government.
We are not sitting the best and brightest to represent us.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to bring up your website, too, as we get going. So your website is Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. You can find that at conservativesconcerned.org. So this is a place you can go to find out more about Demetrius's organization. And before we jump in, I did have a short video clip I wanted to show. I kind of took one of your videos that you had on the site, and I reduced it down a little bit, but I think it gives a good overview for people about what your guys' mission is. So, Leon, can you play KOL number 1?
Hi, I'm Demetrius Minor. I'm the National Manager for Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. We live in an age where many are afraid or unwilling to confront the harms of the past. But we can't get to where we're going if we don't know where we've been. I'm standing right here at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. It was here 58 years ago that an event known as Bloody Sunday occurred. 58 individuals peacefully protesting for equality and justice were met with violence and brutality at the hands of 150 members of law enforcement. Now, 2 generations later, just like those who crossed this bridge, we still have so much to fight for to see liberty and justice for all. One of the most crucial ways to achieve this is to transform our criminal justice system. Racism, inequality, and violence still permeate our justice system. What needs to be created is a system that centers on healing, accountability, and safety for all. The death penalty has a history of racial bias. It perpetuates violence and doesn't keep us safe. It is inefficient, it is unethical, and it supports the existing flaws that are within the criminal justice system today. Together, we can transform the justice system. But we can only end the death penalty if we partner together. Shoulder to shoulder, we will build a more safe, equal, and just future for all Americans.
And that's a great video that you had. And I reduced it down just a little so we'd have more time on the show. So, so you can go to Demetrius's site and catch that entire video, so you can see more clips about the history and the movement and everything. But so tell us a little bit about, I guess, how's it going, and what's how is the movement going?
The movement's going well. Thank you for asking. As a matter of fact, hopefully by the end of this summer, we will actually have a new website, a new logo. And so we're giving our branding a little bit of a facelift, if you would. But the work is going well. I'm glad that you played that particular video. That video was shot last year at the famous Edmund Pettus Bridge that's located in Selma, Alabama, which is a hallmark of the civil rights movement. And that video was shot in conjunction with the Juneteenth holiday. And the message that we conveyed was, just like Juneteenth, the individuals that found out in Galveston, Texas, they were free already, but they didn't find out until that particular time. And so if none of us are free, then if all of us aren't free, then none of us are truly free. And so it was to highlight, in that particular instance, the racial bias and disparities that have been exemplified and shown forth throughout the justice system, especially with the death penalty, and calling that to attention, to awareness, to educate conservatives and those on the right on one of the many reasons why we oppose capital punishment.
So Dimitri, your argument against the death penalty, it is clearly it's not a legal argument, because I think it's constitutional. But your argument is primarily a moral argument. Is that correct?
There's many arguments. I came to oppose the death penalty initially morally. But as I began to study it more, I found out that it did not align with any pillar or any tenet of my conservative beliefs. So it begins with a moral argument, but then it also transfers to a fiscal argument. It costs more to execute someone than it is for someone to serve a sentence of life without parole. Then there's the argument of just pure government ineptness, which we were talking about prior to the taping of the show. I don't trust the government to deliver my mail on time. I don't trust the government to give me accurate COVID numbers. I don't trust government officials to properly fulfill their role and duties. Why would I trust the government? And I say this absent of any hyperbole or exaggeration, but why would I trust the government with my life? And so there's a myriad of reasons why capital punishment should be opposed, or at a bare minimum questioned. It begins morally, but again, it's other reasons as well.
So even with the constitutional safeguards of due process, you still think there's a problem with the implementation of the death penalty?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the fact that we have exonerees on death row, the over 200, which means that there's almost 200 times that we've gotten it wrong. There has been innocent people that have been put to death before. The way that I view it, one person put to death is just one too many. And it is, we're talking about, if I can refer real quickly back to that quote that we just talked about, about even essentially wise people get it wrong. And the death penalty is an arbitrary practice that allows it to be the only punishment that is irreversible. So if you get it wrong, you can't say, oops, I'm sorry, let me go rectify the problem. There's no going back.
Well, and let me jump in. Leon, can you bring up the visual real quick? So here's a website called deathpenalty.info.org. And so this kind of, it really hits the nail on the head about what you're talking about the idea that, hey, look, we get it wrong a fair amount of the time. This is a map of death row exonerations. And you can see they've numbered by state, all the different states where they've literally said, hey, this guy was on death row, but we made a mistake. So that's a serious issue. The idea that we know that many people it's happened to, and there's probably a bunch more. I mean, given the mistakes we know that government's prone to make. So,
well, but this, I'm sorry, Dimitri. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so this raises to me an interesting question about the use of the death penalty. I mean, you would agree that there are cases, I believe, where the police, law enforcement, must use deadly force on the streets in the performance of their duties. Now, this is really the state executing human beings, well, in our case, American citizens. So how do you deal with that issue when, in this case, it's even worse because it's one human being using his or her judgment to execute another? Now, you can argue that is in the performance of his or her duty, but the fact of the matter, an execution is occurring. How do you square that with your beliefs of being against the death penalty?
Well, I believe that you can simultaneously oppose capital punishment and also bring awareness of misuse of police conduct and question the use of deadly force that's conducted by police, and corruption that's that can be evident within law enforcement. But I would not want to compare or confuse the two. The capital punishment is what some would think is the rendering of justice. But again, when you look at the practice of capital punishment, you look at the history of racial bias within its applications, you look at the innocence factor, you look at the fiscal component of capital punishment, and the money that's being allocated towards funding it, and how that can be reallocated towards things such as more services for victim family members, more services that goes towards maybe crime prevention, violence prevention in local communities and local governments. I mean, there's a litany of things that money could be better used for. But I don't want to confuse that with the conduct or misconduct of policemen, because even now, as that is occurring, there's things to counter that or to limit that, such as cameras that's put on their equipment, in calling that into accountability. So just because one thing has been done for centuries or decades or whatnot, doesn't mean that it's done in good practice.
Okay.
Well, one of the things too I wanted to jump in on, because you brought up the fact that we've had clearly racial inequities in the past that have caused there to be maybe a disparity on how the death penalty has been meted out. But another clear thing that we can't get past, and it's still clear today as well, is the idea that if you are poor and you're facing a death penalty charge, you're much more likely to have poor legal representation. And this particular Leon, can you bring the visual back up? So this particular article from the Los Angeles Times says death row isn't a high-income neighborhood, nation's legal experts say. And and they say, like, in California here, every one of the 384 men and women awaiting execution as of July 1st, this was an article, this was from back in 1994, so it's a little bit dated, but it says, was poor enough to qualify for a lawyer at state expense. So, I mean, these are people who aren't getting the best legal representation. If you contrast that to people who are, basically very rich people who get accused of murder, none of them ever wind up getting the death penalty. I mean, it's just like, it's absurd. You almost get so very few of them actually wind up facing it. A lot of times things are thrown out for different reasons. These are just a few of the pictures of people who, they did crazy things like murder their parents or other things like that. Rich people.
So Jason, with that said, the death penalty is an inadvertent messenger for class warfare. Because what you just so eloquently said, it highlights not just the disparities between black and white, but also between rich and poor, right? It's further exploiting that divide to where, like, if you have limited resources or no resources at all, then you're at the mercy of an inept justice system as it is, that's supposed to be blind, but it's not. Contrast that to if you are wealthy and you have the means and the resources to make sure that you have adequate legal representation, then you're able to circumvent the process where that it will allow you to be on death row. And so we hear from conservatives all the time, or many conservatives that say, hey, there's a two-tiered justice system here, right? The capital punishment is a perfect example that does exist. If you're poor and you're born in less favorable economic conditions or surroundings, then you're more likely to face a capital punishment sentence than someone who is not.
Yeah. Well, one of the most clear cases, and it just happened to come up right about this time, is the idea of the O.J. Simpson case, which is kind of a weird case because he was somebody who was, he was charged with essentially, this is a particular article that brings up the whole past. But here's a Gallup poll that talks about what the nation thought, and the majority of people clearly thought O.J. Simpson was guilty, according to a Gallup poll that was taken. But he had a team of 5 attorneys essentially who were looking out for him. And we had a clip, but I won't waste the time with that at the moment, just because I don't want to lose the time that you're on the show here. But he had a dream team of about 5 different big time names, attorneys who, people like Alan Dershowitz and other people, F. Lee Bailey, Johnny Cochran. It really, and most of us don't get that.
There's also another important component to that. You're absolutely right. He had he had the good defense that good money could buy, right? So OJ is definitely an anomaly. However, one of the jurors who was later interviewed much later after the trial said, hey, we knew OJ was guilty, but the reason why a non-guilty verdict was rendered was because we also have to look at the context at the time of that trial. It followed Rodney King. Racial tensions were heightened between Black communities and law enforcement. So a non-guilty verdict was rendered as vengeance or as retribution for the way that Rodney King was treated by LAPD. I'm not justifying that. But again, it shows a justice system This is further evidence and proof of a justice system that has exemplified racial bias for many times, and communities, especially minority communities, have felt that for decades and decades. And that was highlighted and that was brought front and center during the O.J. Simpson case.
Well, it also too shows as well that politics, even if it's, that was a case of race, but there could be other political issues involved too in a certain case that could easily push people to maybe, I look at certain people like Julian Assange and others who are in jail right now, and clearly there's political issues involved in all that. Now, he's not facing the death penalty. Well, technically, I guess he's facing, is it treason or something? So maybe he is. I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But clearly a lot of politics around. In his case, it looks like a case of just practicing journalism. So yeah.
But not to lose sight of the important point here, though. I mean, whenever racial politics is infecting the justice system, which is clearly what happened in the O.J. Simpson case, we are on a dangerous trend here that could lead us in very bad places. It really could, because we can't use the justice system. There's no way on God's green earth we could ever use the justice system as a form of reparation or a form of retribution. When we start doing that, we don't have justice anymore. We have something else.
That's the perfect argument against capital punishment. Capital punishment hinges on retribution and punishment. It's all about things that are punitive, action that is punitive, right? And so what we're saying is, the death penalty only recycles and resurfaces pain, anguish, trauma. It doesn't give people closure. It doesn't give many people closure. Now, there are some people who have been impacted by violence who petition for the death penalty. So I want to make sure I'm not making a blanket statement for everyone here. But in lots of groups of murder victims, family members, and survivors that we have dialogue with and that we have consulted with and have built relationships with, they don't want the death penalty because, number one, it's not going to bring back the life of their loved one. And number two, it doesn't bring closure. And again, it's just allowing that pain to resurface. And so that's not what they're advocating for. That's not what they need or desire. And so, Leon, you hit the nail right on the head there. Capital punishment is so symbolic of retribution and punishment.
Indeed.
Well, I know you've got to go soon, so I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you, I guess, one, throw a question at you and give you a chance to talk to about anything you want to leave the audience with. But what, in your mind, is the best argument to raise skepticism with people about the death penalty? I mean, it's obviously you've talked to a lot of different people and a lot of conservatives who are fundamentally for the death penalty. So what's your I guess, what's your best argument that you throw at them?
Sure. Now, for those that want to use scripture to validate the death penalty, I said, okay, fine. Is Jesus Christ himself coming down to administer justice? And number two, do you trust the government as it is currently constructed to execute or administer a capital punishment sentence and it be totally fair? And within conservatives and libertarians and those who are on the right, there is just this inherent skepticism of government. And so when I present that question, they lean into that, and unanimous answer is no. For those who are fiscal conservatives, I say, well, what if we were to take what's being spent on capital punishment and actually spend it on things that work? Healing services, benefits for victims who have experienced trauma from violence. What if we were to use that to empower local communities to serve as violence intervention experts? What if we were to do that instead of a death penalty sentence? And the unanimous answer is yes. And it's all about meeting people where they're at. as someone who is staunchly pro-life, when talking with pro-life conservative, I said, being pro-life does not mean that you agree with how someone lives their life. It means that you actually agree they have the right to live it, and that we're being consistent with our values and our principles from natural birth to natural death. So it all depends on who the audience is. It all depends on the person that you're engaging with, which side of the issue is of utmost importance to them. But I think there's different ways to have this conversation where we can present healthy alternatives to capital punishment.
Okay. Well, let me bring up, Leon, can you bring up his Demetrius's website again? So it's conservatives concerned about or concerned.org.
Conservative.org, yeah.
Yeah. And so definitely you can go check out, I mean, and just, we didn't have enough time to talk about all of it, but I mean, they've been, it's not, the news isn't updated, but here, but they've been making progress too. They've apparently, you were in Oklahoma recently as well, and you've got them, I guess, considering some changes as well in their death
We have
penalty.
a great campaign going on in Oklahoma right now where we're advocating for a moratorium to be put in use. And we're pretty hopeful and optimistic that that can be achieved in the next legislative session. We also have a bill that's in Ohio right now that is being co-sponsored by Republicans in the House and Senate. We're almost close to getting that across the finish line, where the Ohio Republican governor has indicated that he would support it. So we are seeing momentum on our side. We're definitely seeing a shift take place with conservatives, which is great because it's going to be conservatives and Republicans that are needed to help the repeal of capital punishment become a reality nationwide.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Dimitri. And if you're watching us on public access, we're still going to stay on and talk. We have one or two more little issues we want to talk about, but you can catch the rest of that online. But again, thanks, Dimitri, for joining us. We know you've got to go. So again, a great job you're doing out there, raising some skepticism on this issue.
Always a pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation, and I like to come back on once we give a facelift to our website. I think you guys will enjoy it.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
We've got more questions too.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Good deal.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dimitri.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot very much. Thank you very much. Okay.
Well, Leon, I know you probably got some ideas on the whole OJ thing too, since that just happened. OJ just passed away recently, and in fact, maybe you could bring up the visual again real quick. So this was the timeline page that ABC News put out, and so he gotten to 76, and the main reason we're talking about this on the show is just because of the issue of legal representation, but it also is kind of a big point of reference in the history of the country on issues of race and I guess police conduct and the judicial system. There's the famous white Bronco chase with all the police cars following it down. I know I was watching that when it happened as well on the news.
Me too. I was.
I think you could have avoided it. So almost every, well, in fact, the trial, we have a little video clip. Let's play that. It's KOL 2. That kind of sets the stage for this issue of what the trial was about a little bit, but also that massive legal team that he.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is going to be a long trial, as you can
In
tell.
what's been called the trial of the century, O.J. Simpson seemed to face an unsurmountable battle.
I've never seen so much evidence against someone in a case that's gone to trial as there was against O.J. Simpson, ever.
Enter the so-called Dream Team, Simpson's all-star defense.
That'll be interesting, I think.
Including Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, and of course his most trusted ally, Robert Kardashian.
So that just we just had enough there so that you could see who the the dream team was. But yeah, I don't know about you, but if I've ever had a legal problem, I don't get 5 top of the line attorneys.
It is true. It is true. We had raised this issue of racial politics a little while ago. This trial, this whole scenario with with O.J. Simpson. I mean, it was so bad when you think about it, because O.J., a black man, was accused of killing 2 white people. Okay, Nicole Brown Simpson, who his ex-wife, and her friend Ron Goldman. I don't know if there was a relationship between those two, but he was accused of killing both of them, and the evidence was clearly overwhelming. All right, I think Vincent, I forget his name. He used to be a well-known DA in Los Angeles. He wrote a book about this thing, and he just said, just like Dan Abrams said, the evidence was overwhelming against OJ. But the problem came up because of the racial politics involved. Okay, now if you remember, OJ used to live up in one of those exclusive neighborhoods in the Los Angeles area. And the Constitution requires a jury of your peers, okay? That would be people living, I guess, in your general area, maybe in your county, all that kind of stuff, wherever. I don't know how wide that is defined. But they moved that case from where it should have been filed up around where OJ was living, and they moved it into the downtown Los Angeles, where there was the jury pool was more, they like to use the word more diverse, but we know it's mean more black. And as it turned out, he had an all-black jury, okay? And I think this was a clear case of whether you want to call it jury misconduct or whether you want to call jury nullification, whatever you want to call it, okay? Racial politics got so involved, so deep into that case, okay, that OJ became an innocent man, well, maybe not guilty man, solely because of his race, I think. Really and truly. I can't see how any objective jury could have sat down and looked at the evidence that was presented in that case and say this man was not guilty. I can't rationally find an explanation for that. I really can't.
Well, I agree. He definitely appeared guilty, but one of the things too, I mean, when you talk about ineptness of government, we wound up having this situation where, you had the police investigation where it looked like there was some, it doesn't look like all the evidence was planted, but it looks like there might have been 1 or 2 pieces of evidence that might have been either tainted or planted by the cops that was revealed during the trial. And once the government shows that it's not playing a fair game, then I think all of the trust in the system goes out the window too. So I would at least give the jury a little bit of I guess leeway in this, because even though he does appear that he was guilty, again, if the government is not playing a fair game, then yeah. So that's at least that's the way I was seeing it.
Well, Jason, I will, I don't want us to sit here and relitigate that case, okay? I mean, we could probably go on all day about this O.J. Simpson case. But at the point in time that evidence, quote unquote, was planted, the police, Mark Fuhrman in particular was the person who was accused of planting the evidence. The police had no idea where O.J. Simpson was. So how would they be so stupid to think, well, I'm going to frame this man, I'm going to plant evidence, and they have no clue where the man is? I mean, if they say, well, he was home, well, then they could have said, well, you could have sneak it in and drop it in. The man was in Chicago at the time, but the cops did not know this at the time, but he was in Chicago. And they would plant evidence and not know where he was. This would look so stupid. I mean, the cops may be racist, which was the reason why they would have planted the evidence, but they're not stupid. So Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I'm not completely sure about the timetables with the glove and all that, but I do know that there was an issue with the lab where they claimed they did certain practices, and then they showed during the trial that they didn't actually do the things they claimed they did, as part of their standard operating procedures, which just, when you I guess there's all kinds of times we've seen in just real life when you're working in an industry or whatever, when you have standard operating procedures, and it's possible that those things might get fudged a little bit because people think nobody's watching, and it's not necessarily that they're trying to rig the game. It's just simply that they're a lot of times the procedures might be so onerous that people just aren't able to follow them. I remember there was a case in Chicago where they had all these rape kits that they had gotten, and they wound up taking the rapes evidence of all of these women. I think it was over 500 women. This was like 20 years ago or so, probably close to the time frame of the O.J. Simpson trial. And they had about 500 rape kits full of evidence, and they never processed them. So all these people who literally thought that they were having the police look into the crime against them of rape, and the evidence just sat on shelves because nobody ever sent it to get processed. So,
you're right. This lab work, that issue was raised in the O.J. Simpson trial, this of sloppy lab work. I mean, there's a real famous case actually in Massachusetts, came out of Massachusetts, of a technician who, just literally just fudged the data, and a lot of people end up in prison because of it. Ironically, the woman involved in this is a Trinidad immigrant, like I am. Okay, but the sloppy lab work issue is really something that have to be paid attention to, and it was raised in the O.J. Simpson trial, but it wasn't enough to exonerate him. Honestly, Jason, it really was not. Seriously.
Yeah. I think when you start to have all those little signs, though, and people are already on racial tensions, then it was pretty easy for them. And then to top it off, the ineptness of the prosecution, letting him try on that glove.
That glove.
I'm sure there must be an image here. Oh, there it is. Him trying on the leather glove, where they said. Yeah, and essentially Johnny Cochran brought on, well, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Well,
exactly.
He's trying on a leather glove over another glove. And I think we all know you try putting on one glove over another. It's not going to go on very easily. But they were able to make a big show of it there during the trial. And so, it's...
And what is worse about this thing, about that whole glove going on, putting on the glove thing? Everybody know OJ is an actor. Okay, everybody knows that he acted in several movies prior to this trial. So what do you think OJ is gonna do? Oh God, he's struggling. Oh God, I could put on a good show on that one. Imagine for a man who have actually done movies. Okay.
But and OJ wasn't even a very good actor either.
Exactly.
Exactly. But just struggling to put a glove on doesn't really take a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is funny though, because when we talk about the act, and afterwards he was arrested later on for an armed assault in Vegas, where he broke in trying to some people's hotel room, trying to steal a memorabilia that he claimed was his from these collectors or something, and of course he always claimed he was on the search for the real killer.
on every golf course in Florida. Yes, we know.
Yeah. So it's certainly a point of reference for the nation. But anyways, as far as the issue though of the death penalty, I don't know that he would have ever faced the death penalty, but just the idea that here's a case of somebody who almost everybody would have I guess a lot of people felt that he was very guilty going into that. And again, having a dream team of 5 lawyers, it's clearly justice is meted out a little bit differently based upon what kind of representation you have in the system. But man, when the state's going to put you to death, that seems to be the one area where we would hope that that's not going to play a role in.
It's true. That's a good point. I mean, it is. I mean, I think the point is valid, about, Dimitri kind of made this point in, halfway joking way, I guess, and stuff like that. You don't trust the government to deliver his mail. You don't trust the government to do X. You don't trust the government to do Y. All these things that he laid out, which is true. Why would you trust the government with life? Okay, that to me is an important point. And I mean, we know the government involvement in almost anything it usually ends in misery. It always does. Why would we think that the administration of the death penalty would be any different? But as I told you, this is one area of my beliefs that I really struggle with. I truly struggle with this, because I really do believe there are some people who deserve the death penalty, and I think OJ was one of them, quite frankly, if you want the truth. But why should they allow the government to execute citizens? Yeah. That is a tough call, boy. That really is a tough call. So.
There was a couple of philosophical questions I wanted to raise with Dimitri, and maybe we'll get him on that on the next time we have him on. But hey, let's kick those around right now, me and you, because you were just saying that, hey, there's some people that definitely deserve it, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask him as well. I mean, suppose you had, say a Saddam Hussein or an Adolf Hitler. Right. I mean, we kind of know those people are terrible, but in the end, does the same logic apply as well? I mean, if you're saying, well, who told me about all their crimes? Well, it was our government. In fact, you might even say with somebody like Saddam Hussein that the government even aided him in his crimes. I don't know, but what do you think? I mean, is there anybody that I guess we should say, hey, even though we know they deserved it, if we had perfect knowledge and a perfect system, both me and you, I'm assuming, would be on the same page and say, yeah, this person deserves the death penalty. But I mean, even in those cases, do we ever think we have enough knowledge to say yes? Because we don't have perfect knowledge, and it's somebody like a Joe Biden justice system that's going to be looking into that, right?
Well, even that is a really difficult question for me, Jason. Honestly, I have to admit that, because take what if we had Adolf Hitler, say, supposing this was what we had today in front of us, and the evidence of Hitler's brutality to me is overwhelming. Okay, that is overwhelming. Now the question is, do principle apply in the terms of the state executing people? Should that apply here? Or should we say the evidence is so overwhelming, this is a case where the death penalty is richly deserved? I would lean, as I stand right now, I would lean on the richly deserved side of that, because the evidence here is overwhelming. We have dead bodies all over the place that we can point to. Now, if you start that slippery slope, though, where does it end? Okay? Where does it end? Because I use the expression, evidence is overwhelming. And that expression was used in the O.J. Simpson trial, right? Yeah. I mean, we just saw the clip of Dan Abrams saying that the evidence is overwhelming. That attorney whose name that district attorney whose name I cannot recall right now, he wrote a book that I totally 100% agree with. The evidence is overwhelming. So, does my principle apply in that case? You see, I
guess that's the problem, right? I mean, it's like we say the evidence is overwhelming. It's like, who gave you the evidence? It's the government.
Exactly, right. Exactly.
And I mean, you think about it. I mean, even a politician like a Joe Biden, we go back like 20 years, and here's a guy who literally said that he didn't want busing that would integrate schools because he said it would lead to a racial jungle is what he said, which is horrifyingly racist, but that's who Joe Biden was 20 or 30 years ago. Remember, he was the guy who said of Obama, when Obama was a senator and seeking the candidacy, he said here, like Obama is a miracle. I think he called it. He's the first black politician, is what he said, that was
clean and articulate. He's clean and articulate.
and he said it's a storybook, man.
A black swan, yes.
Right. And so that's a guy who was literally pushing policy 20 or 30 years ago, to put a lot of black people in jail, essentially. Or that wound up putting a lot of black people in jail. And clearly he had a lot of racist ideas back in those days. Now you flip the script to today, and he's like 180 degrees in the opposite direction, where everything that's everybody who's white is racist, according to him, except himself. He's not racist, but everybody else. And he will do things like bring a person to the front of the line based on their skin color and how much melanin they have. So it's just, it's absolutely nuts to think that, to want somebody like this to know that these types of people are going to be the watchmen of the system. And certainly we can, I guess, debate about how much government we need, but man, in something like the death penalty, where there's no room for a mistake, I think, gosh, because I used to be for the death penalty. I used to philosophically think, if somebody deserves it, give it to them. But man, the more libertarian I became, the more I realized, I'm libertarian because I think the government makes lots of mistakes. A lot of incentives of government are wrong. And so why would I trust them to get it right in something this serious, especially with people like Joe Biden out there running the system?
I was firmly supportive of the death penalty, and we had a very famous case in Trinidad of a guy named Abdul Malik. That's not his birth name, but he went to England, made a little name for himself in the Black Power movement, and then came back to Trinidad and committed some very horrible crimes. Well, I grew up in a society where the death penalty was executed through hanging. Okay, that have changed now, and I was fully supportive of it. I did not have a problem with him when Abdul Malik was executed. I had no problem at all. But as I grew older and became more liberty-minded, and one of the persons I have to say who really influenced me on this death penalty issue was Tony Snow. I don't know if you remember him. He used to be on Fox News, and he's dead now. God rest his soul. And he once just raised the issue of why should we be giving this power to the state to execute people, and it just started me thinking about my support of the death penalty. And I fully understand people like Demetrius, who's so skeptical and obviously against the implementation of the death penalty. I fully understand their arguments. I really do. But so I still struggle with it, because I still think there are those people who really deserve this thing, really and truly. But your principles, once you start down that road, once you start down that slippery slope, where does it end? Right? Where does it end? And we know what the government gives, right? No matter what they get involved with, we always end with misery. So how many innocent people are gonna die in implementing this death penalty? I don't know. How many people have died? I don't know. And these are the kind of things that trouble me about this death penalty. But I'm still struggling with it. I can't say that I'm against it right now, and I can't say that I'm for it fully right now. So it's a struggle. It really is a struggle.
Well, one other question I wanted to ask Dimitri as well, and this sort of, I guess, is just a question of the logical flow from the position of being skeptical about the government delivering the death penalty. But suppose we have situations, as we have with all presidents, where we have people overseas in countries where we haven't declared war with them, and we have a drone out there, and we just suspect that they're a terrorist, and we launch a hellfire, some kind of a missile from a drone to kill people, essentially, that are in places where we're not at war at. Is that, to me, that almost sounds like we're delivering death penalties there too, and we're not even having a trial. And so I really wonder how people who are skeptical about the death penalty feel about that as well.
Even that, Jason, is a little difficult question for me. Okay, and let me tell you why. Let's go back to we raised the issue about police officers on the streets. Now, the police officers on the street doing their job sometimes have to use the death penalty. They do, without trial, without a jury, without nothing like that. Okay. Now, if you think about that concept in your head, that we are delivering the police in the performance of his job have to use the death penalty. You have to use deadly force to perform his job and to perform it effectively. Even though we must have safeguards for that, obviously we must have, because we don't want police officers abusing that power. Clearly not. Now, when we get to the issue of drones in a foreign country, what are we doing? Is it any different from police officers on the streets? Is it any different? We have found people who, I mean, you can argue about whether this is right or wrong, but we have found people who we believe to pose a threat to us, to our allies, and we are delivering justice to them. Woo! Now we're playing God in a sense. We obviously are, because there's no trial, and we are playing God, and we're deciding that this is our time to deliver justice, and that is problematic in and of itself. But I don't see that very different from police officers who have at times to play God and decide who should live or die. I don't see that very different.
Except I think there is one big difference, and it's the idea that, you know, we are all living under the same jurisdiction with respect to a police officer. And so that person has essentially, I hate to use the word social contract, but I know how much Democrats love that word. But I think essentially
that's a left wing thing again, Jason. So keep going.
But I think if there ever was a moment to use the term social contract, it's the idea that we literally are living under a bunch of you know, we're not even talking about abstract laws like, you know, somebody says you can't drink raw milk or something else and they pull a gun on you, which we've seen the police do. but suppose it's something really simple like, hey, you can't steal from that person, or you can't assault that person, or whatever it is. And so the police then respond to that, this set of laws that we all kind of acknowledge probably have a good reason for and we're living under, and the policeman pulls his gun and points it at somebody, and we all have a way to have checks and balances on that system too, because we can talk to our legislature, we can talk to our city council about the way the police behave. But now, if you're somebody in another country, you don't have any of those rights with respect to, you know, if Uncle Sam has his eye on you, you're in another country, you know, and we hear about mistakes happening I remember there were some cases in, I think it was in Afghanistan, where occasionally they hit a wedding party or something else. And
that happened twice to my knowledge in Iraq, actually. I don't remember Afghanistan.
Okay, Iraq. Maybe it was Iraq then. Yeah. But the idea that, you know, here, you talk about sort of playing God. I mean, imagine if you're somebody who's a neighbor or something standing by and you just see this flash from the sky and all your neighbors disappear.
Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, there wasn't really any due process or anything. Just trust us. We're the United States government. We know who the bad guys are.
Well, you know, the only safeguard against this sort of action occurs really on our side, in the sense is the president who order these sort of things, and technically we still have the ability to remove him through impeachment or through elections. So that's the only real safeguard we have where that is concerned. But you're right. In another country, I mean, the person who is targeted, or their family members who may have survived an attack, they have no recourse if the drone attack was a mistake, or if killed had collateral damage that involved the lives of people who had nothing to do with the terrorist act that we are trying to prevent, or we are trying to punish this person for, whatever. So they have no recourse. So this is seriously problematic, and I can see why it's philosophically problematic, because the Constitution applies here in the United States, and it doesn't work perfectly, obviously, but it works for the most part. But in a foreign country, it's a different game. I mean, there was even cases. You talk about in a foreign country. There are cases in during the Obama administration where I think 3 American citizens were killed ordered by Obama, but it was on foreign soil. One of the American citizens was killed through collateral damage. I think it went after the drone attack was against the person's father, and the son died in the attack. As far as I know, he had nothing to do with any terrorist act, but the father did, as far as I know. But these are American citizens, okay? Even though they're on foreign soil, they're American citizens, and Obama ordered attacks on them. That's problematic, seriously problematic. So.
And I'm not completely sure, but I think it was during the Obama administration that those Reuters journalists were killed as well, that Julian Assange had shown that video through WikiLeaks of those guys being essentially targeted by a drone, I guess. And
yeah, I believe it was. I believe it was, yes.
Yeah.
I believe it was, yes.
Yeah. Now it was a mistake. They weren't purposely targeting Reuters journalists.
No,
I don't think they wrote a bad story about Obama or something that caused them to want to do that. But the point is, they mistook them for terrorists, or they were engaging. Those reporters were engaging with maybe people who might have been terrorists, and they wound up killing them. Yeah, it's I don't think if I were somebody who was a bystander down there in Iraq or some or similar place, Afghanistan, and I happened to see those guys get vaporized immediately, that I would have thought, well, it's okay, because a Nobel Peace Prize winner in America has his hand on the button.
It's quite ironic. The Nobel Peace Prize ordered more drone attacks than any other president.
Just keeping the peace.
Just keeping the peace. That's exactly right.
It's almost like awarding Darth Vader.
Yes.
Just because he was all about keeping the peace for the empire. But yeah, well, we were going to talk about the Governor Ron DeSantis' faith and community initiative, just because Demetrius has a little bit of a hand in that. But I think we'll let that topic go this week, because since Demetrius isn't here. We'll wait till the next time we get him on the show to talk about that a little bit. But it does bring us up when we talk about our inept, incompetent leaders. That brings us up to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol for the week. And apparently, Joe Biden was, Leon, maybe you could bring up the visual here. Let's see. So this is a CNN report, and it talks about how Joe Biden, this was around April 19th, so I guess it would probably on April 18th. Joe Biden was out in Pennsylvania, and he was just saying several things that I guess led CNN to say, hey, he's making misleading claims on the campaign trail, which is a minor miracle in itself that CNN is reporting on Joe Biden saying. But this was such a whopper, or such a bizarre thing, that they couldn't really cover for him in this case. And let's bring the video so that you can see what it was Joe Biden said that just raised so many eyebrows this last week.
Is that
KNP1? KNP1.
KNP1 is.
Called him Uncle Bozy. He was shot down. He was in the Army Air Corps before there was an Air Force. He flew single-engine planes, reconnaissance flights over New Guinea. He had volunteered because someone couldn't make it. He got shot down in an area where there were a lot of cannibals in New Guinea at the time. They never recovered his body, but the government went back when I went down there, and they checked and found parts of the plane and the like.
So the sound quality was a little bad because he was outside and there was a lot going on, but that's just the way Joe Biden train wrecks happen. It's just wherever you happen to have the camera and you're catching him. But apparently he claims his uncle Bosie, who was in the military, was shot down over enemy territory in New Guinea, I guess it was, and that he was
Papua New Guinea. Yes.
Yeah, and that he was likely eaten by cannibals. So, now, according to CNN, they go through a lot of the different things he was talking about. But Biden's uncle in World War II, and they claim, okay, it's not true that that he was shot down. They said, according to the Pentagon report, it was both engines failed in low altitude, and then apparently it ditched in the water. So it didn't land on the island where supposedly he would have been eaten. So unless he was fished out of the ocean,
and then
Then and there was one survivor in this too. Apparently, he was picked up by a barge, so he wasn't even picked up on New Guinea. the survivor, but from the airplane crash. But anyways, that was the take, and of course the White House, still does, won't back off of it. They just won't acknowledge that what he actually said. They just said, hey, he cares a lot about the soldiers, is what they keep saying to cover for this. I don't know. What do you think, Leon? It's just another bizarre moment from our commander in chief.
Well, Joe Biden, during the 2020 election cycle, he told us if we had a little difficulty distinguishing between him and Donald Trump, we ain't black. So what he was really telling us was that the cannibals would have eaten our blackness. Okay, that is what he was really saying. So here we are now in 2024, and Joe Biden is telling another story about how the cannibals ate his uncle Bosie. You see, Joe Biden have a little problem. I guess the Bidens, in general, have a little problem, okay? Because Joe Biden grew up in the black church. He beat a corn pop. He grew up with Puerto Rican family. He grew up with a Jewish family. The other day, he grew up with a Greek family. All kind of stuff. I don't know when he had time to be a white man, quite frankly. I don't know.
Well, he was in South Africa marching with Mandela.
Exactly. So I'm telling you, I don't know when he had time to be a white man. I really don't know. So what he's trying to tell us really and truly is the cannibals ate his history, because only he knows this history about being in the black church, about being in a Greek family, in a Jewish family, in a Puerto Rican family. The cannibals ate the poor man's history. So let's just give him a break, okay? It ate his history. That's why nobody else knows about it. Not even the Pentagon knows about his uncle being eaten by cannibals. Not even the Pentagon knows this. But Joe Biden knows it, because the cannibals ate his poor history. Poor guy. I feel sorry for him, quite frankly.
Yeah, I just can't, imagine ever having. I mean, we've never had a president like this who just says the most outrageous things, and watching the media cover for him. In this case,
exactly.
Yeah, and in this case, the media isn't really isn't completely covering, because you see CNN is fact checking him on this, but they're not lighting it up either. I mean, if this was anybody else in the past, it would have been. The media even did a expose on Joe Biden about 30 years ago on all the lies he was telling back when he was running for president himself. I think it was around 1980 or something. 1988. Yeah.
Yes.
And they showed all of this litany of lies, and that's what actually, in plagiarism, and that's what tanked him. And now they've all forgotten it, right? Which is amazing. I mean, you talk about all you have to do to dig is look at your old stories. That's all you have to do as a journalist to uncover the truth, and they can't even do that nowadays. Just absolutely absurd.
During that 88 campaign. So Joe Biden stole a whole bunch of stuff from the guy name was Neil Kinnock. He's a British, was a British Labour leader, And Joe Biden stole all this stuff and talk about all the Bidens over 1,000 years, blah, 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 almost word for word from Neil Kinnock's speech. And that, you're right, it tanked his campaign. But the point is, though, if you look at Joe Biden's history, even before 1988 and continue even today, all you get is lie after lie after lie after lie. And some of those lies were quite racist, if you want the honest truth, okay? Biden have a proclivity for either exaggerating things like his record in law school, or a proclivity for telling lies, total falsehoods about the things he have done or experienced. It's unbelievable. But you said we have never had a president like this. I think, Jason, we have never had a senile president or somebody suffering from serious dementia. No, I mean, I was making another joke about Joe Biden and his cannibalism claim and all that. But Joe Biden is clearly senile. I can't even believe that the Democrats to this day is trying to prop this man up. That this half-dead man, mentally half-dead man, is the person that they're going to have to try to run this country for another 4 years. Are you serious? Seriously?
Yeah.
And this is the man they're going to prop up? This man who most of the times can't even make a coherent sentence? This is the man? We got a real problem here, because if this man is going to lead us for the next 4 years, where is he going to take us? Look at the condition of the country right now. Where is this man going to take us? And if he is not doing it, then who is running the country? Because that person was not elected by us. So who's running the country?
What's so interesting about all this too is beyond just it clearly having some cognitive decline. I'll say it more nicely than senile. Cognitive decline. We're seeing the effects of somebody with cognitive decline who was, quite frankly, very comfortable lying before they had cognitive decline.
Exactly.
So this is an interesting situation we're in, but it's amazing. When there was a book by Fletcher Nebel called A Night of Camp David, and that book I think was written sometime in the 60s maybe or something, and it was a thriller about what happens if the president goes crazy and he's in office, and the story centers around the character of the vice president, and sort of how he is experiencing his relationship with the president, and how he eventually has to sort of connect with other people who are in the cabinet to eventually confront him and potentially remove him. And it's quite a good thriller how that goes. It's not like one of these explosion gun chase things, but it's more of a real constitutional crisis type of thriller. And but in that, everybody is sort of on the same. This is what strikes me, is that everybody's on the same page. It doesn't matter what party you're in. If the president is going crazy, you realize that this is a big threat. This is a problem for the nation. We're not there anymore. I mean, we're literally at a point where it's our crazy guy, so it doesn't matter. We're just going to cover for him. Exactly. And come hell or high water, we're just going to cover for the craziness of our own guy. And I mean, there's never been somebody as just ridiculous and outrageous as Joe Biden in there. And yet, we just hear excuse after excuse for what's going on. So,
but Jason, the serious thing about all of these things, okay? I mean, look at the national security risks that we are engulfed in right now. The border is wide open, and God, we don't know who the hell is coming over that border. All right, and this is Joe Biden's policy, right? Open up the border, let people come across. We don't know who's coming across that border. We don't know. It could be spies, it could be terrorists, it could be just criminals, gangs, you name it. They're all coming across the border. But the even more serious threat, the President of the United States holding nuclear codes. Do you really believe Joe Biden is in any mental shape or has a mental capacity to be making decisions about the nuclear codes of this great land of ours? Do we really believe that? Do we want to re-elect this man to hold those codes, to be walking around with a soldier right next to him holding what they call the shoe or the box or whatever the hell it is, which contains the code? The football, thank you, the football.
And we're off season right now, so we don't. We're off season for football season.
Yes, we hope we'll stay off season while this man is in the presidency. Holding this man control those codes. Are we serious? Are we serious that we want this man to be controlling the codes? I mean, fine. I never agreed with Barack Obama, okay? There's nothing, I can't think of any policies that he implemented that I would have agreed with. But at least he had his cognitive faculties totally engaged. So yes, I could have trusted him to have the codes, even though I never agreed with him. But you look at Joe Biden and you're going to tell me this is a man that we think is capable of handling the nuclear codes of our land? This is insanity. And the media, worse yet, the media is covering for this man. This is horrible.
Yeah. Well, when we hear these old stories about, like, Nero fiddled while Rome burned, these quotations of just how empires fall type of stuff. And it's just, man, you look around and it's, you kind of feel like I can't believe that, everybody believes that the naked emperor has wonderful clothes on. Look at Joe Biden's, great new clothes, his great new wardrobe. I mean, wow. It's just, but that's kind of where we are. So
and now there's an ad out. I didn't see the ad, but the ad is trying to make the case how sharp Joe Biden is. Could you imagine that? They are trying to deceive us into believing this senile man who can't make a coherent sentence is so sharp. Yeah. He's so wonderful. He could lead us to that next utopia. Don't worry, just re-elect him.
Yeah, we've got to have on the show, and maybe we'll get a permanent clip of this that we can just pull up at any time. But I think it was Morning Joe or one of those other guys saying he's as sharp as I've ever seen him. And we just play it after all because we've been running Knucklehead Noise Patrols where Joe Biden is clearly the longtime winner of all these clips we've been showing because it's just so bizarre everything he says, and yet. People like Morning Joe are running around there. When you talk about the media covering for him, right? He's as sharp as I've ever seen him.
What we should do, Jason? What we should do between now and the election? I think we should get some, about 3 of Joe Biden's more famous gaffes or his famous bullshit. Pardon the language, but we should play it. We should play the bullshit and then have Morning Joe saying he's as sharp as we have ever seen him. Play another one, he's as sharp as we ever seen him. And then play the third one, he's as sharp as we ever seen him. I think that would make some great.
Yeah. We're showing our cards to you for the audience members, but that's definitely a project we're going to work on. Well, I think we've come to the end of our time. We definitely shot way past our guest time. Thanks so much, though, for joining us. And again, we're trying to bring these interesting guests to you who are out there fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And we hope that will inspire you to, I guess, figure out ways in your community that you can make a difference for liberty, somehow move the ball forward, maybe, run for a local office, maybe a school board, maybe help out your, local libertarian party or just liberty oriented candidates, even if they're not libertarians, just, somebody, just anything you can do in your community to spread the word and try and move the ball forward. Because I tell you, this is where we're going to. We ain't going to get out of it unless everybody pitches in. So, until the next time, though, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.